we'll see. How do I get into this? So when you look at history and you look at all the great men throughout history, you know, first of all, it's all men. It's like these people who everyone admires, and a lot of these people who have who have truly been seen as the greatest of all time, like the smartest, the elite, everything. Like when you look at what they thought about women, they were absolutely terrible, but, well, some of them were. But they're still celebrated by everyone, and people still celebrate these people. And I just find it fascinating how someone could have said something a couple of centuries ago or a couple of millennia ago, and if someone were to say that today, if a man were to say that today, they would be called like an idiot. But if it was a philosopher who said it a long time ago, then they're still a genius, even though what they say might be the exact same thing. That, yeah, I know about all of this, like, product of their time, and you know, you need to whatever consider the circumstances, but still I still find it hypocritical, or weird, I should say. Maybe not hypocritical, but at least weird how different people can be towards the same kinds of people with the same kinds of thoughts. Just seems weird that somebody, because they lived like 200 years ago, they could get away with saying all kinds of stuff and still be praised by society. Which I'm not saying is wrong, just to be clear, I'm not saying we shouldn't praise these people, but saying the same thing today, it's like all hell breaks loose in certain communities. But it's something like, I know not everyone can be a great person, but I just been thinking about that is like, well, no matter what, I can never be one of the great men of history. And yeah, I know you it's like narcissistic to even want that, but there's something about it that is like a bit, makes me feel a bit beaten down, that I can not, because it's, I don't know, I can never be a normal person, so if I'm gonna be so weird and so different, I might as well be it in a positive way. But yeah, I couldn't exactly be in the same position as some great philosophers, because all the great philosophers throughout time, except for a couple of feminist philosophers who are only receiving praise within the feminist communities, except for those, all philosophers have been men. I mean, how many great female philosophers do you know of that aren't only known for being feminists? I don't know, I have barely heard of any. It's like that's the one thing you can be in order to be great and celebrated. And then it's only, you know, in feminist communities, which I don't think most people are in a meaningful way a part of a feminist community. I think it's a bit of a subculture thing, even though some people get really upset if you say I'm not a feminist. But those people who are really into it seem to be a minority. And are into the history and everything. So and also the fact that, I don't know, I feel like it's never, I can't really have conversations with a lot of men, maybe some, but I don't, a lot of men are never, seem to not be able to just have a conversation with a woman like another person. It's always like you're this weird and bizarre creature that it's impossible to understand, you know. There are all these memes about, you know, how to understand, this is how to understand women, part 1, basically. With the point being that it's absolutely impossible to understand us, and it's like, yeah, it's like we're treated like we're some sort of bizarre creatures, even when we often, like when we say something straight out, it's still like somehow, she doesn't know what she's talking about. I mean, she's a woman, she changes her mind closer than the speed, quicker than the speed of light. Sorry. It's that kind of thing going on, you know. And sometimes, of course, women are praised and sort of romanticized and seen as these like angels and whatnot. But there's always this like distance, this sort of sense that women are something else, women are an anomaly, women aren't just regular people like men. They're something weird and bizarre and different and maybe exciting, maybe interesting, or maybe just disturbing and a nuisance, but certainly not just people. I read a post one day, it was a while ago. There was a man on a forum, and I'm not saying he represents because it was like an autism forum, but he said like something like, I just can't imagine someone in a female body having any thoughts or feelings. Like, it's just not possible. It's like bizarre to think that someone in a female body can have any thoughts or feelings of her own. And that's something that I felt, well, at least someone is putting it clearly, like, into words. Because that's the sense I get, that some men, again, don't know the percentage, but some men, whether they admit it or not, that is truly how they seem to think. Like, they will look at someone like me and be like, you know, it just doesn't register that I can feel and that I have an internal world up here because I have a female body. Because that's how different we seem to be viewed a lot of the time. And that's something that I try to do a bit of research to see if there's something general about that, like men struggling to even perceive women as conscious beings. But I couldn't really find anything. It was just talk about, you know, I don't know, about whether men or women are more empathetic in general, which of course the general idea is that women are more empathetic, but not specifically like about can they, for instance, empathize with other men but not with women, things like that. But that's something that I think a lot about actually, because it's so clear. It makes something clear that, you know, a lot of us feel like, yeah, that seems to be the case, but very few people ever say explicitly that they can't, that they just don't perceive women as being conscious beings. And that's also something that has really made me feel uncomfortable, because it's like, okay, if somebody doesn't think my feelings are real, then how can I persuade them to treat me with any kind of basic decency? I mean, that could be a reason why someone would wanna, or someone wouldn't have a problem with hurting us. And it's like, how you can see just by looking at somebody whether or not they think that. And, you know, being a woman, I'm obviously very weak physically, and I could never defend myself against a man. And I've heard all kinds of horror stories about men just beating women, sometimes to death, sometimes almost to death, but in ways that are absolutely torturous. And I don't, how do I avoid those possible situations? I mean, I can isolate, that's kind of what I do, but if I'm ever going to meet or be involved with men in any way, it's like I'm lucky if I find someone who doesn't have some sort of disdain for women or desire to hurt them, considering how popular that seems to be all over the world and all throughout history, and how many people just make excuses for it when it happens. So anyway, if I could ask men something, I would ask them if they when they see a woman, if they see like a person, somebody who's able to like feel or think or have an internal world, or if it's just like a walking object to them. it's a bit of a controversial topic, and but something inside of me, I just feel like I wish people could just be honest about it. Like, because this man who wrote it, I mean, he's not alone. There are men who clearly think that way. Everything about how they talk, how they behave suggests that. It's just as that a lot of them don't put it into words, and at least when someone puts it into words, it becomes easier to talk about and understand, rather than just keeping it all secret. Because, you know, to be accepted by society, I suppose, because it's not politically correct to say that. Yeah, what do I say more than that? More could be said about my journey and my idea of what could I potentially be as a woman. I mean, one option is of course to be a traditional wife and to get married and things like that, but it's not like it's easy for me to find a good man. And yeah, you might say I could find a man if I wanted to, but that's very different from finding a man who will actually respect me and treat me as a human and actually view me as a full human, rather than just a half human or a walking object. That's the difference. It's like, yeah, there are tons of men out there, but how many are there that have basic human decency? It's not about being perfect, it's about basic decency, because I've heard so many nightmare stories of women who have been abused by men in all kinds of terrible ways. In ways that is like, as a woman, I could never imagine treating a man like that. It's like, I have no problem whatsoever with understanding that men have feelings and imagining a man being just a human. That just doesn't exist really. But there seems to be this disconnect where a lot of women will be very understanding or try to be very helpful towards men, and that's not reciprocated. It's just, yeah, it's women who try to be there for everyone, try to help everyone, and men just don't have that same care in them, the same desire to care, and so we end up in a very unequal situation. I think that's, one of the reasons why men are in certain ways more privileged, because there is another side to the coin, because apparently women, if the information that I received was correct, then women actually tend to rank their happiness a bit higher than men, which is a huge deal. So in a sense it's like, okay, my phone died there and I can't record any more videos, so I was going to say that men have more power in a sense, but they're not happier necessarily. And other than that, I think I was almost done with the video anyway, so I'm just going to try to end it here, I suppose. But yeah, that was just a conclusion. I think that oftentimes just we're trying to be very generous towards men and they're not the same towards us. And yeah, and then maybe I'll return to this topic, because I can never get everything in a video that I want to talk about. That's just not possible. But anyway, if I need to make an update, I'll do it later. So goodbye.